Hey there, Heather, ho there, it's Jeff Cutter Diamond. Welcome you to a very special yeah, right, second and 10 Stone Cold Hockey video. We are doing a tribute match to this guy, Glenn Hall, as he just passed away a couple of hours ago. As of this taping, it's 9 o'clock Eastern Time on January 7th. So he played for the Detroit Red Wings, Chicago Blackhawks, and St. Louis Blues. Many of you will remember he played for the Blackhawks. Many of you will remember he played for the Blues, but not many of you remember he played for the Red Wings. Anyway, he seldom missed a game, winning the Vezina. Of course, this was not the Vezina voting system that we all know and love. That people voted for your best performance of the regular season. This was a goals against thing. He did this 3 times, was named first team All Star 7 times, which is a record still. Not even Brodeur or Was even done that, or even Jacques Plante, or even the legendary Dominic Hasek. He won the Calder Trophy for Best Rookie, Mr. Goalie. He was the first butterfly goalie. Patrick Waugh kind of idolized the butterfly. He was one of the 100 greatest NHL players in history. So he played for Humboldt. You know what happened 8 years ago, 2018. Well, anyway, he played for Windsor also in the OHA, and then he signed with the Red Wings in 1949. Of course, the draft was not made until 1963. The first few years he was in Detroit's minor system, and he would be the backup goalie for the Red Wings in 1952 behind Terry Sawchuk. However, Detroit managed to put his name on the Stanley Cup before he even played one NHL game. He finally was the main goalie for the Red Wings in 1956, and that was when Sawchuk, I don't know, did he have a nervous breakdown or something? I can't remember. But anyway, yeah, he displaced Terry Sawchuk and made him expandable to Boston. But unfortunately, with Boston, Sawchuk basically quit in the middle of the season. His mental health was just not there. Hall played every game in his first full season, 12 shutouts, and was named Calder winner as Rookie of the Year, and was named second team All Star goalie behind, I guess, Jacques Plante. Unfortunately, though, Hall sucked terribly against the Habs in the Stanley Cup Finals. In his second full season, he was named the first team All Star goalie, basically made him the best goalie of the league. Despite all this, the Red Wings made a stupid move and decided to trade Glenn Hall to Chicago alongside Ted Lindsay. Well, they punished Ted Lindsay because he wanted to co-organize the NHL Players Association, and the owners were assholes back then. Like, especially Jack Adams. Like, fuck, he may have his name as Coach of the Year, but that guy was a giant douchebag. If you want to know more about Jack Adams, watch the movie Net Worth, 1996. Al Waxman plays him to great detail. My boss at Canadian Tire kind of looks like Jack Adams. Anyway, nevertheless, so yeah, it was puzzling. He was traded to Chicago. I mean, Detroit didn't really have the start goalie until Sawchuk came back after spending some years in exile. So Hall played for Chicago and actually, you know, got his revenge on Detroit. Detroit dumped him off, and then all of a sudden, he, alongside Ted Lindsay, won the Stanley Cup in 1961 for the Hawks against the Detroit Red Wings. He had 502 consecutive complete games, which spanned 8 seasons at the time, of course, because the NHL season was more than 60 games and all that. So 502 complete games. Most goalies don't even play 70 games in a season, much less. So 502 consecutive games, you would have to play net every game for 6+ years. Can you imagine that? Every game. So anyway, 502 consecutive games, and he never wore a mask during the streak. He did so late in his career and all that. Of course, everyone knows about Glenn Hall and his legacy. One of his bits, the legacy, is basically that he would throw up before each game and all that. He was named first team All Star goalie for Chicago 5 times and second team 3 times. Despite winning the Vezina in 1967 as the goals against leader, and of course choking the Stanley Cup semifinals to the Toronto Maple Leafs, Hall was left unprotected for the expansion draft. Chicago thought that Glenn Hall was not the main goalie anymore. After all, the Blackhawks got upset by the Leafs in the Stanley Cup semifinals. And basically, alongside Phil Esposito, who was traded to Boston, one of the worst trades of all time for the one freaking Pitt Martin. Glenn Hall was left unprotected for the expansion draft. St. Louis needed a good goalie, and they picked him up. So they stocked themselves with veteran talent, including Red Berenson and Phil Goyette, and actually won the West playoffs, which got them to the Stanley Cup Finals because the NHL decided to have the original 6 teams in one division and the 6 expansion teams in the other division, thus making it a expansion versus um, experience club every time. Unfortunately, though, Glenn Hall and crew could not win the Stanley Cup Finals. Hall was great. If it wasn't for Glenn Hall, I don't think the Blues would have made the finals. They got swept by the Habs. The Habs did take out the Blues in 4 straight, like everyone said. But the problem was the Blues only lost by 1 goal each time, including twice in overtime. It could have been a massive rout. It kind of was, but the 4 game series, you would note that the Blues only got outscored by the Habs by 1 every time. He was named the Conn Smythe Trophy winner, which was he was the 4th guy to do so, but weirdly enough, the 2nd guy that played on a losing team to do so. And then St. Louis managed to get Jacques Plante on their side, so he would share duties with Glenn Hall. In 1969, they would win the Vezina Trophy, of course, for goals against. That rule did not change till 1982, and had 13 shutouts. Hall was named his first team All Star. He actually retired after the 1969 season, but was persuaded to come back for the 1970 season. And the Blues, in their 3rd straight Stanley Cup Finals, 1969, they got swept by the Habs. They had to face the Boston Bruins. And wouldn't you know it, Glenn Hall was the guy who was scored on by Bobby Orr, and then Noel Picard tripped him with the stick and the flying image and all that. He decided to retire for good after the 71 season, retiring at age 39. The Hockey Hall of Fame inducted him quickly in 1975, and he was the goalie coach for the Flames in 1989, winning a Stanley Cup ring. Yeah, Glenn Hall was amazing on that. Yeah, he had the legacy over 400 wins in his NHL career, 84 shutouts, 11 All Star games. Was one of the first goalies to do the butterfly style goaltending, which I know for Patrick Roy, my idol, all that. He still holds the record for most first team All Star selections of 7, which was shocking because, you had great goalies like Patrick Roy, Martin Brodeur, and even Dom Hasek. In 1998, before the 21st century started, he was named number 16 on the greatest hockey players around. The third, like 16 for players. He was the 3rd highest ranked for a goalie, but he was the highest ranked for a living goalie because Terry Sawchuk, who was ranked number 9 in the NHL's that Hockey News list of the 20th century, passed away in 1970, and Jacques Plante died in 1986. Humboldt, Saskatchewan would erect a monument to Hall's career on Glen Hall Drive, Highway number 5. And of course, you know how Humboldt was shattered 13 years later. He also had the legacy for not really going to having to preseason stuff, instead wanting to paint his barn, which was actually non-existent. So yeah, he won the Calder 1956. That can't be right. No, no, no. Oh no, it is. He did play for the Red Wings a few seasons, but he didn't play enough games to not be a rookie. Okay. Whatever. So yeah, he played in many All-Star games. But back then in the 50s and early 60s, the All-Star game was basically the NHL champion would take on a team of the other team's All-Stars. Vezina winner in 63, 67, 69 for goals against. Conn Smythe won 1968, 3 Stanley Cups. Well, 2 as a player, 1 as a goalie coach. His final career with Detroit, Chicago, and St. Louis, 407 wins in 906 games, with a 49 and 65 mark in the regular postseason. All right, so now we got this. We had the 1965 Chicago Blackhawks against the 1968 St. Louis Blues. Of course, Stone Cold Hockey doesn't give you every year, so here we go. So it's the 68 Blues and the 65 Hawks. Rules are we will play until we get to someone with 3 wins. First game sees St. Louis win in overtime as Glenn Hall played for Chicago, but Seth Martin, former Canadian amateur all-star, played for the Blues. The Blues scored first. Bill McCreary, not the Bill McCreary who was the referee. That was his uncle. From Red Berenson, big move as they picked him up from the Rangers in a massive trade early in the '68 season. And Noel Picard, yeah, the guy who tripped up Bobby Orr. Chicago would score on the power play on a goal by Doug Moans from Phil Esposito. Yeah, Phil Esposito was a Blackhawk. And then on the prolongation or overtime, Ravlich in the box. Jimmy Roberts, not the tennis guy, scored the goal from Jerry Melnick and Berenson. Game two sees the Hawks win 4-3 as Hall be Hall, Hall and Hall crime. St. Louis goes by Dickie Moore, the former Hab and Leaf standout. Terry Crisp, the future Stanley Cup head coach. Ironically, in 1989, when Glenn Hall was the goalie coach, Terry Crisp was the head coach. And also Gary Sabourin. Chicago goes by Katie Warren, Pierre Pilote, Camille the Eel Henry, and Bobby Hall. That guy. Game three sees the Blackhawks win in overtime, Hall on Hall crime. St. Louis goals by Larry Keenan, who is Mike Keenan's uncle, and again Keenan. Bill Hay and Bobby Hall for Chicago, and then in overtime on the power play with Jimmy Roberts in the box. John Pie McKenzie, yes, that guy, future Bruins icon, scored from Chico Mackey and Matt Ravlich. Game four sees Chicago win again in overtime as Hall beat Seth Martin. St. Louis goals by Red Berenson and Don McKenney, future former Ranger and Leaf. The Blackhawks goals, Bobby Hall scored twice, and then on the power play again, another overtime goal on the power play. Sabourin in the box. Hall finishes a hat trick from Bones and Warroom. So Chicago's up 3-1, coming home to the barn, Chicago Stadium. It will be Glenn Hall on Glenn Hall crime, but the 65. But we are going to make sure Seth Martin plays for St. Louis because, Glenn Hall could win it for the 65 Hawks. Denny DeShorty is his backup. The 68 Blues, Glenn Hall was the main guy. Seth Martin, former world champion with the Trail Smoke Eaters when Canada sent a club team to the World Championships. 1961 World Champs. 33 years later was the next time Canada won the World Championships. And Don Kelly also in that. For St. Louis, Red Berenson, the guy that they picked up from New York, great move. Frank St. Messiah, Jerry Melnick, Jimmy Roberts, not the tennis guy. Bill McCreary, the referee's uncle. Gary Sabourin, Larry Keenan, Terry Crisp, as I said, Stanley Cup winning head coach in 1989. Don McKenney, Ronnie Shock, the guy who shocked Minnesota, pun intended, with that double overtime goal to send them to the Stanley Cup Finals. Well, they sent Ron Stewart to New York to get Mr. Berenson. Craig Cameron, Tim Ecclestone, I think he also came from the Rangers. Barclay Plager, part of the Plager brothers with Bob. There was another Plager brother, I think. Can't remember. Anyway, Dickie Moore, yeah, Wayne Rivers, Fred Huckle, Roger and Noel Picard, Al Arbor, yeah, the defenseman that wore glasses on the ice. Of course, helmets were not mandatory at the time. Norm Bourdain and Ronnie Fortin. They had run out to Shangi Talbot, but they traded them away. Chicago, Bobby Hall, the Golden Jet. Stan Mikita, who was in his wild man face. A couple years later, he wised up and became the Lady Bing winner for Gentlemanly Player because his 2-year-old daughter wondered why her daddy was on the penalty box. Kenny Warham. Phil Esposito, yeah, he was a Blackhawk. Chico Mackey. Pierre Pilote, a good defenseman. Eric Nestorenko. So Nestorenko doing the job. Doug Moans, who played hockey till he was in his 40s. Bill Hay, Dennis Hall, Bobby's younger brother. John Pye McKenzie, Fred Stanfield, who was a Bruin as well. I think he went in the Espel trade. Camille the Eel Henry, Matt Ravlich, Al McNeil, future head coach for the 71 Habs, and basically being booted out because he hated Andre Richard. Doug Jarrett, Moose Fasco, still around. Wayne Hillman and Ken Hodge Sr., years before he went to the Bruins. All right, so here we go. Puck drops. 6 minutes into the game. Chicago has a chance but fails. 5 minutes later, Chicago another chance and a fail. Chicago another chance and a fail. 5 minutes later. That's Makita. Oh. Martin standing on his head. And Barrison gets whacked by Pilat. St. Louis gets the first chance. That play ends. Noel Picard in the box. Overnight, no action. No score through 20 minutes. Showing the card, but top off power play goal. The Spirit of Chico and Bill Hay makes it 1-0. 3 minutes later. Chicago. Oh, they had a chance. Much later. Castillo. The Robin's Nest. Nesterenko, his first from Jared and Chico. 2-0. 3 minutes later. Split. Aggression. 5-minute penalty on Chicago. It's Pilat. So St. Louis can score as many times in those 5 minutes as they want. And bad news. That St. Louis will be in deep trouble as Chicago is one step closer. And yeah, the 65 Hawks did go to the Stanley Cup Finals. They lost to Montreal in Game 7. 2 minutes into the game. Third. No shot. Much later. Sabrin. Can Chicago ice it? Not so fast. Chico is trying to do it. 4 minutes later. No. Nesterenko again from Kay and Radlich. 3-0. I didn't even know who getting rolling from Nesterenko and Espo with the corner. Glenn Hall's going to pitch a shutout. Why the fuck not? 4-0. St. Louis, did they have any chances or no? I don't think they really had many chances at the puck or all that. But yeah, Seth Morgan give him all the credit in the world, but he's just not Glenn Hall. St. Louis, Seth 1-2, Glenn Hall 0-2. Goals against aren't that half bad. They scored how many goals? 9 goals. 8 different no. Yeah, 8 different goal scorers. Larry Keaton was the only one to get double digits. Double. And then Chicago. Glenn Hall played all the games they did in each shorty. A 1-5-3 goals against. Well, he's king of the hill. Bobby Hall scored 5 goals. Warren and Nesterenko with 2 each. Yeah, Bobby Hall had 5 points, all goals. Pilat had 6 points. Well, he had 5 assists. But Bobby Hall was the icon. Glenn Hall did his job. And yeah, the Blackhawks easily do it. Because Glenn Hall is still Mr. Goalie. Believe it or not. Rest in peace. I'm Jeff Diamond. Adieu.